Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be going over the impacts of the new patch notes that just dropped. So we're not going to do any reading here, we're just going to go over the results and how it's going to impact how we play, builds, and currency making strategies, of course. So let's dive right into it. So, Atlas department, we've got new sextants. Ritual's going to be on a sextant, Blight's going to be on a sextant, Delirium is going to be on a sextant, and this is very, very exciting indeed. We'll have to see whether they're going to be on the Awakened sextants or normal sextants, but this is going to increase access to these lead mechanics significantly, and it's going to push players to, even harder to use sextants, and I actually love that. This is going back to the old days where, you use sextants on maps and that's the way you juice them. No more of this Delirium stuff, so sextants are absolutely going to be a staple of the new league, and buying them is going to be pretty much mandatory, I think, if you want to make the uns. Very good. Next up, Cyrus should be now farmable, which is a massive change. So you can now, when you get a Conqueror on your Atlas region, talk to Zana and she's going to give you an item, which is a map now. This is going to be a craftable item, so I imagine it's not a quest item, meaning it can be traded. You can also roll these, giving you up to 20% increased loot from Conquerors as well. So let's break this down. Cyrus is now a target farmable encounter, giving you a new option to farm as a boss killer. So in the past, you had to do maps and you needed to do them really quickly to be able to efficiently farm Cyrus. Now you can buy the Cyrus encounter off mappers and do it as a boss killer. Very, very cool. In addition to that, you also have a way to influence how much you're going to have a chance at having a Conqueror's Exalted Orb and those Awakened Gems from those Conquerors. So that's super duper exciting. Overall, it's going to be an increase in amount of currency and a new strategy to farm currency for mappers. It's going to increase the incentive to complete maps fast and also spec into, kind of influence area progression passives for those characters. And then you're also going to have a brand new thing to farm as a boss killer. Very, very good change there. Absolutely a home run. Thank you, Grinding Gear Games. It's going to be a new thing to test out for everybody, and I think there's going to be a lot of, loot from 100 Cyruses and all sorts of stuff like that. So overall, win for mappers and win for bosses. Very nice buff. Next up, we've got some overall league occurrence nerfs. So, in general, most leagues are being reduced by 20% with the exception of Harvest. Delirium is included in that, so you're going to have a pretty hard time finding a Delirium mirror naturally without stacking league mechanics, and that's going to be pretty rough. But of course, to offset this, we do have pretty much every league mechanic now on sextants, so you can gain access to them through that. However, that is a random mechanic. But yeah, overall, very, very good there. We still do have pretty much all of the league occurrence stuff unchanged on Atlas passives, so it's not too much of a nerf. And if you're wanting to run a specific league, it's still now more easy than ever with the new Atlas Ascendancy passives. So yeah, it's a nerf, but also, from where we were a couple leagues ago, it's still a net buff. So not too no issues there at all. All right, so synthesis maps off of Zana are 50% rarer. This is an absolutely massive change. So this is actually going to make it much harder to encounter these things on, obviously, Zana while farming Harvest, or while farming anything Zana related. This was a valid strategy in Ritual League, and it has been pretty much annihilated. So overall, I expect that the synthesis uniques will be more expensive as a result of this, as there was a large amount of synthesis maps being generated through the Zana kind of method. Definitely a big hit to that strategy. I wouldn't be pursuing that strat anymore, and I'd be focusing just, on other things, as that is a massive nerf. 50% less is half. Alright, so pretty rough. Ritual's being added to the base game, and I think it's pretty exciting. So base Ritual is pretty, whatever. It's not that crazy. But with the new Atlas passive that they're adding, it is actually quite insane. You have the option to reroll an additional 2 times and also increases the amount of rare ritual types in the area. So stuff like the currency ritual, the unique ritual, and stuff like that will be increased. The ability to reroll an additional 2 times is essentially 100% more rituals while using blood-filled ritual vessels, as it allows you to kind of burn those points and get a wider selection of choices, which is very, very cool, and it adds a new dimension to ritual. So I imagine this this will be a fairly lucrative thing to do using blood-filled rituals to get enough points to continually reroll. So very exciting changes there. Ritual will be a strategy moving forward if you can get access to those ritual vessels. It's also going to be a big incentive to go for ritual splinters when you're doing the actual ritual encounters as a normal player, because ritual vessels actually function as ritual scarabs moving into the new hours, which is pretty interesting. So I'm actually quite excited about this, and access to ritual should be at a fairly good kind of point with the sextant, the ability to kind of get ritual through the vessels, and also these ritual ascendancy nodes, which actually buff ritual like from the Ritual League. So Ritual will be more strong in Ultimatum than it was in Ritual League, which is actually kind of weird. Yeah. Moving on, harvest changes, massive harvest changes overall. Completely insane. So of course we've been over these. We're not going to go into too much detail, but there are a few new ones here. So the itemized boss item, which drops from T4 Seeds, Oshabi, when you slay it for the first time, your Holder Crafting Station storage will be increased from 10 to 15. It's pretty much going to be mandatory for anyone engaging in a harvest mechanic, so everyone's going to want to do this at least once, creating a fairly high demand for the Oshabi item itself. I imagine it'll probably be anywhere between 50C to 1x. It's also worth noting that the Oshabi item is a new farmable boss for boss killers to do as well, and if it like is profitable, then that'll be another avenue, another thing for players to do, and it'll also be another project for people to do. I imagine there's going to be people killing 100 Oshabis to see the results. As a bit of a spoiler, she drops stuff like infused beachheads. She's got her own uniques. She also drops winged scarabs, so it could be entirely possible that she's very worth farming as a boss killer, and it could be pretty interesting to see how that plays out as well. It's also worth noting she's not a phased boss, so completing a ton of this per hour is totally on the cards, and it could be very exciting to try that out as well. Pretty good there. As an extra kick in the nuts, good crafts are also rarer. So stuff like the augments will be even more rare. So that's pretty insane. Nice one, grinding. Okay, Abyss. Abyss is actually kind of insane now. So as a result of the massive rebalance to League rewards, Stygian Vices are no longer dropping in most of the places we expect them. So no more in Heist, no more in the Incubator, nothing like that. Apparently, the only place that we can apparently get them is from Abyssal Depths. So this is a massive change, and 86 Stygian Vices are one of the most in-demand crafting bases, full stop. Most characters use a Stygian Vices. It's the best belt base, full stop. And the demand for this has been slashed, and it's kind of pushed all into one area, and that is Abyssal Depths. So farming Abyssal Depths could be a massive money maker in the new league, and it's actually kind of exciting, and it'll be interesting to see the price of these, because we also now have a deterministic way to get Abyss, which is Abyssal Scarabs. This is actually a really big deal, and just farming Abyss could be one of the most profitable things you can put on your maps moving forward. Very, very excited to see how this pans out. And the Abyssal Ascendancies also do increase the chance that you'll get an Abyssal Depth as well. So tons of things stacking up here to make Abyss a fairly attractive option for putting on your maps. Definitely something to look into if you're a mapping player. Very exciting. All right, Blight. So Blight overall, I think, is actually a net neutral. The reason I say this is because of blighted maps. Let's talk in the context of maps though. So in maps, your blighted encounters will just be more powerful, as the roll on your maps now does contribute to how much loot they give you, which is a really big deal actually. So you're basically going to get more loot from your chests, and that's really great. On the blighted map department, they've actually taken off lucky chests from teal oils and moved that to a higher tier. I think it's azure oils now. So it's going to be more expensive to roll your blighted maps. And overall, that is definitely a bit of a nerf. So yeah, pretty rough there. But they have also added a new type of oil. Just got to turn my phone off there. And that is going to be fairly powerful. The new corrupted oil is going to be in massive demand. And the reason for this is players really do want to look for a corrupted amulet. +1 curse is just one of the main corruptions here is actually completely insane. And previously you would have to anoint, like for example, a golden oil anoint on like 10 amulets, corrupt them all, and then I didn't get it. That sucks. Now you can corrupt 100 amulets, and then get 1 corrupted oil and anoint that 1 amulet, and then boom, there you go, you got your best in slot amulet. That is going to absolutely be a use case, and the demand for corrupted oils will be insane. Now, these are fairly restricted. You can only get them from corrupted, blighted maps, which is very, very niche. And corrupting your blighted maps doesn't come without a cost. If you're doing a T15 or less blighted map and you corrupt it, it will actually have a chance to completely break. Now, this is, a fairly substantial thing. It'll eat into your chances at getting a map to run, and I think overall it's going to incentivize you to do T16 maps, because to my knowledge they can't brick, and running corrupted blighted maps will probably always be worth it, assuming that you can make sure they don't brick. So very exciting there. Blighted maps did get a lot more worth it to run. The only bad thing is, that teal oil stuff. But other than that, super duper awesome. Very excited to see what comes of that. And, blighted maps are more profitable. Betrayal. So Betrayal received some of the biggest changes that we've seen to Elite mechanic after its launch. Is basically, I can't go over it all because it's just too much. With the mods, you can check out my crafting video I did, but they're going to be a really big deal. They're going to be very, very powerful indeed, and it's definitely going to influence how you craft some of the best items in the game. Overall, I think that you will probably be killing Katarina now from this point forward. There's a bunch of different bonuses for this now, but the basic overall equation is that having a maintained board is overall weaker because there's less incentives to do so due to the fact that the flood is no longer as powerful, and he was a big reason you did so. There could be some merit to it to get to the Veiled Chaos Sword, but we'll have to see. And there's now massive motivation and a big push of rewards to slay Katarina. Not only does she drop her uniques, which are incredibly powerful, not only does she drop scarabs every single time, which will be way more in demand, like massively more in demand. So she drops tons of them. She also gives you T4 rooms on every single member, potentially in the thing. And if you don't have them at T3, then they get upgraded. So you're going to get an absolute truckload of scarabs and also other benefits, which have all also been updated. So it's pretty much a no-brainer that you're going to be killing Katarina, and you should absolutely be doing so moving forward. Very, very interesting. Bestiary. Bestiary, this is a big, big deal. So Bestiary, I'm going to focus on this for a bit. You can no longer multi-box Bestiary. People who had 6 accounts in those maps, that's not on the cards anymore. You can't do that unless you're botting, essentially, which, some players may do, but, they're going to get banned. So basically, the overall result of this is it is now going to be significantly more worth the average player's time to run Bestiary. So much so to the point that it may actually be worth it to run just Bestiary on every map. I'm going to probably be considering doing that. He may now be the most powerful master, depending on how in demand some of these crafts are. But overall, I would say that the supply of beasts is reduced by at least 6 times or more, because, it's not really viable for these other players to just sit and farm beasts as their strategy, because they're going to get 1/6 of the amount of beasts. Now, one thing to also remember is that the uniques from Bestiary only come from Bestiary. So stuff like Farrell's Fur, despite there being a div card for it, will be significantly rarer. All the Venomous uniques, the Sack-of-Wall chest piece, these will all be significantly rarer as the access to them has been slashed. Now, in terms of the actual beast aspect crafts, so, crafting aspect of the spider in your amulet or gloves or something like that, these will be rarer by far, but they may actually be way more rare than you expect. So the reason that these crafts were so plentiful is that the beast farmers in the maps multi-boxing got 6 times the amount of keys. They then sold those 6 times the amount of keys to the Bestiary boss farmers who also had 6 accounts, which then went in there and got 6 Venomouses. So 1 spider in a map became 6 spiders, and those 6 spiders then got traded to a Bestiary boss farm, and then those 6 became 36 Venomouses or something like that. So aspect crafts were just way overblown. Like, there was so many more of them than there actually should have been, and they're now all going to be removed. The only thing that may actually change this is this radius here. So it's entirely possible that you run to the boss in Bestiary, like a Sack-of-Wall or a Venomous, and you open a portal and you get all of your alt accounts in, and then you slay the boss. And maybe all of the characters get it still. I don't know. This is going to be something that needs to be tested, but I imagine if that is still the case, it'll be gone next patch. because it seems they just don't want this in the game, which for good reason in my opinion. So I imagine that the actual supply of aspect crafts is going to be abysmally low compared to what we're looking for, potentially 36 times lower, if you subscribe to my maths there that I just did. All right, moving on. Let's see, what do we got here next on the hit list? We've got Incursion. So Incursion here, massive changes to Incursion. The overall kind of effects though will be that Incursion will be way more worth it to run. A lot of time people skip their temples. That'll no longer be a scenario. You'll always probably at least orb your temples and turn them into a map, which is now part of the game. And if you have the map with, you know, a sacrificial chamber, a lapidary lens, which is the gem version of a double corrupt, or the sacrificial, you know, the double corrupt, sorry, corruption altar, whatever. Those will be worth massive bank. And the reason that I mentioned the lapidary lens here is because Vaal gems no longer drop from normal sources. So if you're doing Legion, you can't get a 21 Blade Vortex anymore. That's not a drop thing anymore, according to Ground Gear Games. It may actually still be the case, but the way I interpret the patch notes is that Vaal skill gems can no longer drop outside of Vaal kind of content. So getting a 21-23 gem is actually a massive deal, and you'll need to use the lapidary lens to do it, making this a massive change and a massive incentive to go for Incursion, as there's now multiple good rooms for the taking. In addition to that, they've also buffed the Incursion uniques, which is a nice change, and the rewards overall will be increased. So Incursion, massive incentives to go after that. So far, Betrayal, Bestiary, and Incursion are, for the average player, all incredibly more profitable, which is a really awesome change overall. Going to make it so it's a lot easier for players to get some access to some good rewards. Legion. Okay, so some new incubators were added. The Blight ones, if they drop Blighted maps, they're going to be good. If they don't, they suck. Delirium, if they drop orbs, they're good. If they don't, they suck. And the Metamorph ones, I imagine, if they drop a stack of the Catalyst, they'll be good. If they don't, they'll suck. So moving on. So the Abyssal Incubators now drops Abyssal Scarabs. We talked about Abyss earlier. The question I have is whether or not these drop the Stygian Vices. If they do, that kind of does destroy what I said earlier, but it also means Abyssal Incubators will be worth doing. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how all this plays out. A lot of it is really in the detail, and we need to see how that kind of pans out. Alright, so Cartographer's Incubators are now a source of Delirium Orbs, which is crazy. They drop maps with Delirium Orbs on them, and Delirium Orbs are way more rare. They only come from Delirium Mirrors now. You can't get Delirium Orbs from Heist. You can't get Delirium Orbs from anywhere else but Delirium, and that is just crazy. So the supply of Delirium Orbs is way lower. In addition to that, they also introduced a change that makes it so that you cannot use a fractured fossil on a synthesized or enchanted item. That means you can't actually even fracture Delirium Orb map even once. So no duplicating maps at all. So overall, Delirium Orbs and their rewards will be slashed. So much more scarce than they are right now. So when you drop a skittering, Delirium Orb, that thing is going to be worth a lot. And also the supply of items from all of these things is going to be so much lower. And it's going to really shake everything up significantly. So yeah, Cartographer's Incubators, as a result, because they have Delirium Orbs on them, are going to be pretty good. Very excited to see how common those are. Elder and Shaper Influence maps are, like whatever. Okay. So we got some other changes here. I don't really have any other notes here other than the fact that Foreboding Incubators now drop the Harbinger Scarabs. I actually thought they already did. No, they didn't. But yeah, so they now drop Harbinger Scarabs, which dilutes the pool of Foreboding, which is actually a nerf, unless Harbinger Scarabs are incredibly expensive, but I don't expect they will be. So Ancient Orbs now also only drop from 68 plus. So Ancient Orbs are a big deal from these incubators. So overall, it's actually a nerf to Foreboding Incubators, unless the Scarabs are incredibly expensive. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, pretty interesting. Okay. Parentis. Alright, yep. So Parentis is actually a bit of a nerf. So by modernizing the actual pool of uniques that come from Kadiro, this is actually going to reduce your chance that you get a Headhunter. And stuff like a Shavs. Of course, there are a few niche uniques, like something like a Badge of the Brotherhood, which are fairly exciting, and the Maloney's Mechanism. But you know, overall, Headhunter was the item. That was the item you were after, and it's the big one that kind of really made all of these things worth doing. So overall, I think it's actually a nerf to Parentis. That's kind of my assessment there. Okay, we've already been over the lab changes, made a video on this one. Definitely worth checking that out if you're interested in running lab. It's going to be very profitable moving forward. Okay, so the main thing I want to cover from the character balance is the cost stuff to mines. So mines is going to be one of the best league starters, and now they have an increased cost to mana. It kind of double dips on it, so it reserves mana and it also does cost mana. So that's going to potentially put pressure on the new mine league starters that everyone's planning. You do already run a mana flask, so seeing how that plays out will be pretty interesting. But this could make playing a miner much more difficult, and you may need to use something like an ad series foible to actually be able to use mines. But that's kind of my only note there. Everything else is kind of whatever. Next up, we got some skill balance. So I'm only going to talk about what I know for a fact. I'm not going to try and like talk about bleed or anything like that because I've never played bleed. So I'm going to talk about the builds and where they will be and where they are, and you know, if they're dead or not. So first up, mana miner with Indigon. So the Indigon change is actually a fairly substantial one. You need to look at this through, like, if you've read the patch notes, you'll understand, but the mana changes could actually make it so that the Indigon buff actually affect the mana reservation of mines. So if you increase the mana reservation of mines by, like, you know, 1,000%, that's 100 times the reservation, then that could actually make it so it's reserving like 70% of your mana per mine or something like that, which would be completely ridiculous, but it is possible. So it could actually make it so that the build is actually not playable. We'll need to actually try that, but it actually could just delete that interaction completely. Hopefully that's not the case and it doesn't apply to Indigon, but yeah, definitely pretty interesting there. So Chainbreaker is now basically going to be, you know, something that's used by slow casting builds. Something like Bleed Vortex is going to still be able to use it, but Mines is absolutely not going to be able to use it because it throws so many things at once. So Mana Miner lost the ability to use Berserk. You know, that's a good 70% more damage that it lost at max, you know, kind of peak build. Definitely a pretty big deal to say the least. But you know, it's like whatever. It would still be a really, really good build without it. If the Indigon interaction kind of scuffs it though, that would be a big problem. So Divergent Berserk also got nerfed, you know, so we weren't using Divergent Berserk anyway, so you know, it's kind of like whatever. But yeah, that's going to be pretty rough moving forward. So the trigger Socketed Gems is actually a pretty big nerf, as that's how you applied your curses and also your Wave of Conviction. So it's been moved from a 4-second trigger to an 8-second trigger. This is a big nerf to a lot of builds, but this build specifically did really make use of it. So that's also a big nerf to Mana Miner as well. So the Wave of Conviction nerf is going to affect everyone. It's getting taken from 25% exposure to 15%. This is a massive nerf for all elemental-based builds. Yeah, so this is going to really hurt anything that uses elemental damage. So that pretty much sucks as well. So Mana Miner overall, is it dead? Absolutely not. Pending the change of Indigon, that will be a very big one. But overall, I think that it should still be a pretty viable build. You won't be able to use Berserk anymore. But you know, you still will be able to play. The fact that you have the mana regeneration that you got from Chainbreaker back should offset the fact that you've got a mana cost on your mines now. You know, it might be a bit wonky overall, but you can probably potentially offset the mana cost, the flat mana cost, by using Reap. So Reap is a new ability coming in. We don't know how powerful it will be, but it has a life cost instead of a mana cost. Now, life is a fairly disposable resource for these Mana Miner builds because you use Agnostic. So using Reap Mines, assuming that Indigon doesn't affect the mana reservation of your mines, actually could completely solve everything, and the build could pretty much be untouched outside of Wave of Conviction, the trigger, and obviously not being able to use Berserk. Alternatively though, instead of Berserk, you can also just reserve 50% of your life using the new blood support thing and take low life, completely offsetting the Berserk changes for most builds. So overall, I think Mana Miner will still be in a pretty good place, assuming that Reap works as we all think it will. So yeah, not too worried about that. Pretty excited to try some Mana Miner action in my future. All right. Berserk abusers overall. So the change overall will affect kind of stuff that uses channeling abilities, things that throw mines or something, anything like that really quickly. If your build attacks more than, you know, once per second or even more than that, Berserk is pretty much off the table. Berserk was mainly used by mana-based builds anyway, because you need that massive mana regeneration. Stuff that uses stuff like Bane as its only skill are still fine, but if you're using Blight and Bane, then Berserk is probably not on the cards. Stuff like Blade Vortex, which was actually a very popular build with mana, is still going to use Berserk though, and it'll still be extremely powerful. And I think that Berserk is still really, really powerful. I'm going to be using Chainbreaker Berserk on my Blade Vortex build, which I'm planning for this build, for this league, so pretty exciting. So Bladefall Blade Blast. So this is absolutely one of the most powerful league starters right now, and it is just so far ahead of a lot of other things. It's actually ridiculous. It's getting about a 30% nerf, which is a big deal, obviously. But it's still going to be one of the best league starters, and I don't expect it will kind of be dethroned that easily. If you're planning on playing Bladefall Blade Blast, you totally still can. You may need to have a bit more damage, or it may take a little bit longer to kill these bosses, but it still will be one of the best league starters because it's mechanically still intact. It hasn't been changed mechanically. We went over this last time with Carrion Golems in the last patch. It got nerfed by 20% or whatever, and it was still a really good league starter. So Blade Blast still super duper awesome. Highly would recommend still going for it if you're used to playing it and you were planning on going it anyway. You may just need to build a little bit more damage or slow down a little bit on your progression. Alright, Blade Vortex is up next. Okay, so they've tried to hit this from every single angle and they've failed. Alright, so base duration, 4 seconds. This isn't a problem if you were someone who played, kind of like using Blade Vortex every few seconds anyway. You won't feel this at all. If you were someone who played with a helmet enchant and, kind of tried to not use Blade Vortex as often as you could, this may be an issue for you. But for someone who spammed the skill like myself, I'm not even going to feel this personally. And for those who didn't, you're just going to have to spam it from now on. Next up, the Radius nerf. This, in combination with a cluster jewel change that is coming in, which is actually a nerf to Vast Power, will significantly reduce the radius of Blade Vortex in general. It's going to be a massive nerf to the area, but this is actually not a problem, as Blade Vortex's power didn't come from its area in the first place. It came from explosion scaling and raw damage. So this nerf is actually not a big deal at all. Even the Vast Power nerf, it's not really a nerf to Blade Vortex, it's a nerf to explosion-based builds. So yeah, this is actually not even a big deal at all. This could be pretty much blank. Next up, the damage effectiveness, and damage does hurt, but you had more than enough damage with full gear. And you're going to have more than enough damage moving forward as well. So you're going to one-shot those bosses a little bit slower. Oh no, that's not good. If you combine Blade Vortex with Headhunter and all the other more multipliers that we're expecting that we're going to be putting on it, it's just not going to be an issue. So the Blade Vortex nerf is overall not a problem, and due to the fact that they didn't actually nerf Explosion as a mechanic, outside of the chest piece, it's going to be the best clear skill. It's going to be the best build again for clear. Big surprise. So Blade Vortex 3.14, here we go. Okay, we'll get into Vast Power and kind of like some future stuff when we get to the cluster jewels. So this is going to be a long video. Unlucky. Carrion Golems. Okay, so Carrion Golems got a absolutely massive whack, and it actually is going to impact it more than people think. So Flesh and Stone got hit. So if you're an aura stacking Carrion Golem, well, I got some bad news. Your auras might not all fit anymore, and you're gonna have to have more aura effect kind of reservation if they are to fit. So that's definitely going to suck. They've also got an 11% nerf on the actual damage of Carrion Golem, and they're nerfing the cone attack as well. So your clear is going to be worse as well. That kind of sucks. And then also with the triple tap. Pentuple tap or whatever it is. They're coming in with First Among Equals nerf, Renewal nerf again, Replenishing Presence nerf, and all of this combined is probably going to be another 30% damage haircut at least, because they're also nerfing the minion Abyss Jules by a little bit. So overall, it was pretty good as a league starter this league, but now it's going to be, it's going to take another hit. And it's kind of in a position where I personally wouldn't league start it again, because it was already an expensive league starter. You needed the Golem Jewels and all sorts of stuff like that. So it's pushed it into a place where I would no longer recommend it personally as a competitive league starter to get the Shaper Day 1 and all that kind of stuff like that. All right. Moving on, Toxic Rain. Okay, so this is the worst kind of nerf that you can do to a skill. It is a mechanical change. Whenever you mechanically change an ability, like we saw with Frozen Orb and stuff like that, it really does hurt the skill and its viability. So they've changed Toxic Rain, and now area actually affects the spread of the pods. So one of the primary ways you scale Toxic Rain is by AoE projectiles and making sure that the pods overlap to increase the amount of times you hit. There was a bunch of breakpoint maths and really interesting, cool mechanics that came in. And this essentially completely destroys all of that. So basically, you're only going to be able to hit with a certain amount of pods at a time, and increasing the AoE could potentially actually just lower that chance even further. So overall, I think this is an absolutely monstrous nerf to Toxic Rain. I am not personally a Toxic Rain expert. You'll probably have to defer to someone who is, but this is kind of put it into a very kind of weird situation where I wouldn't league start this personally, and I'm not going to be recommending it moving forward because I don't know how this impacts the actual overall single target. I imagine it's going to be very significant, and it's a big mechanical change. So yeah, not too interested in recommending that one anymore. All right. Let's move on. So we already talked about Chainbreaker. Let's talk about, let's do a quick recap. So overall, most of the builds, bar Toxic Rain and Carrion Golems, are still in a place where they're probably going to be pretty viable, if not the best build still. And those two builds, Carrion Golem will still be good, but I wouldn't league start it. And then, Toxic Rain, I have no idea how that's going to work out. Sorry for those people who want to play that. Let's move on to the Atlas passives. Okay, so Atlas passives overall across the board have been nerfed anywhere between, like 10 to 50%, actually more in some cases, which is completely savage. I actually don't know why they came in so hard on these, but the overall result will be that all items in Path of Exile will be significantly rarer. That's basically just the bottom line, and it's going to be interesting moving forward. So let's quickly go over some of the highlights here, and I'm going to talk about it. So in Hayward Hamlet, we do have the ritual nodes. These will be incredibly powerful, and using Bloodstained Vessels in this area will be really strong. It'll be an Atlas strategy, which I'm going to be looking into. Turns End, the double tap, triple tap, whatever tap you want to call it, on Bestiary. So the primary kind of ways to get beasts was through the new Atlas passives as well as Watchstones. Both of the areas with Bestiary have been nerfed. They have also increased the chance at Great Migration, but that wasn't the powerful node there. The main area though that you did do Bestiary has had its rare beast multiplier reduced. So you're going to see so many less rare beasts. It's going to be insane. That's kind of the outcome here. It's still very much going to be worth doing in those areas. It's just going to be a little bit less in terms of the rarity of your beasts. So yeah. Lex Proxima. So Heart of the Grove could actually be completely insane. It basically guarantees you getting Ushabi from every T4 seed you get. T4 seeds are potentially going to be rarer, but this could be quite lucrative because everyone needs to do Ushabi once, and then also it could just be a lucrative boss killing strategy as well. So, I do expect it will be anywhere between like 50 seed to an Exalt, and, farming harvest in this area using the map device could actually be a fairly viable thing just from the key alone. Because 1 in 10 harvests needs to drop it, and it may actually just pay off all of your harvest costs. So this will be a strategy I'll be looking into, and it could be pretty exciting. I don't like the nerfs to Seance. I think this is dumb, but it'll still be a very viable option moving forward in combination with Scarab Sextet nodes. So if you guys don't know, there's a Sextet modifier which essentially guarantees that you're going to get 3 Scarabs per map. There's gilded variants, wing variants, all sorts of stuff like that. And farming this area will be actually more profitable due to the fact Seance exists because it guarantees you're going to get Scarabs from those Sextet mods. And Scarabs will be very expensive. Very, very expensive indeed. So pretty interesting there. Lex Proxima does look like a pretty good area to kind of get some juice going. Lexijuris. They actually nerfed Kadiro again. So not only did they nerf his pool, but they also made it so his Atlas node is worse as well. I don't understand this. It was a fun node, and it wasn't powerful at all. It was kind of a meme, and I don't agree with this change. Next up, Metamorph. So they actually nerfed this too. Actually, I'm going to stop talking about the nerfs. Okay, overall, Atlas talents are actually just straight up worse. I'm going to pick on a few because they actually do have economic impacts. But yeah, I don't like the changes to the Atlas passives. They make them less exciting and it feels bad. But yeah, overall, less loot. Let's talk about the actually interesting ones though. So Pathological, another source of Delirium mobs, has actually been nerfed, which is really, really interesting. So Delirium mobs only come from the mirrors, and they come from the new incubators, and then Pathological. That's the only place to get them. I think you can also get them on maps in Heist, and in Ritual. But basically, you can get them on maps from the sources I described, and this source has actually been nerfed, and from the Delirium Mirrors. So that's actually crazy how Delirium Orbs are going to be that rare. So I wouldn't be expecting too many Delirium Orbs to be in the economy, and the rewards from them will not be present, in my opinion. Except for, the high groups who can buy the orbs. Glenage Tans. So we got some shuffling on the Legion nodes, and also some nerfs to high value targets. So one of the popular strategies of Ritual League was to farm New Vestia with Legion and high value targets for massive currency. So this won't be a strategy in the new league. For starters, Legion isn't on the map device. And then secondly, also Legion Scarabs are going to be significantly more rare, and also they've moved stuff around and nerfed it. So my overall assessment of the Legion nodes is emblematic. If you are running Legion Scarabs, will be really, really profitable. There's going to be an increase in demand for the uniques from Legion due to the fact of some nerfs, some specific nerfs. So Darkscorn and the gloves will be way more in demand. So getting emblems and selling them to emblem runners will be massively profitable, and the access to these will be much lower. But if you pursue an emblematic strategy with emblematic watchstones, you could actually be looking at some massive returns. You will have to secure those Legion Scarabs though, and I'm not sure how accessible they will be. Overall, nerfs, but definitely some opportunity there for some savvy players. Pretty exciting. Valdo's Rest. Okay, so this is a big one. If you're used to farming the Harbingers in Valdo's Rest, yeah, that's not going to happen anymore. So Diplomatic Escort has changed the massive Harbinger pack, which has anywhere between 5 to 10 Harbingers, to instead have 1 Harbinger. So a King Harbinger is a Harbinger which has the clothes and the crown. It's not the Harbinger from the end of Beachhead. It's actually just 1 Harbinger. So that's a absolutely monstrous nerf. It's actually crazy. It's anywhere between a 50 to like 10 times nerf. No, sorry, 5 to 10 times nerf. That's actually a completely brutal nerf. So Ancient Orb supply will be way down, and it'll be pretty interesting to see how that impacts the Headhunter prices. Very interesting indeed. Next up, obviously, Lyra Thane, the other Beast Zone, has also been nerfed. So yeah, Bestiary supply overall massively down. Alright, let's go into item balance. Alright, so main things here are, Explode gone, Poison gone, but 50% Conversion Gloves may also be gone. That's pretty rough. Now, the actual interesting thing to offset this, though, is we have some new Vessel of Vinctars, which have been introduced. So you have a Shock Prolift one, which could be potentially pretty insane with Impulsor, and we also have a Conversion one that's been buffed from 20 to 50%. This does introduce some new build ideas with Pathfinder Ascendant, because you can actually have access to 100% Fizz to Lightning conversion through Vinctar alone. What's a lightning-based build? That's Impulsor is a lightning-based build. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, Impulsor builds are going to be off the wall, and I expect to see Impulsor being a very, very sought-after item, as it's pretty much an explode chest. Guaranteed. And yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting. So yeah, very good changes there with the Vinctar. The devs coming in clutch, giving us some stuff to actually look at instead of all nerfs. Big fan of that. Very, very good. Impactful nerfs. But yeah, 50% Conversion Gloves gone. Maybe. We'll have to see how that turns out. Essence. This is a massive deal. So essences have now been buffed to be a fraction, like an actual hair, off of T1 modifiers. So you can now spam Contempt essences for T1 Fizz, basically. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And for all intents and purposes, for most players, crafting physical-based weapons with Essences of Contempt is now a viable strategy. You can craft some of the best weapons in the game with Contempt Essences, as long as you can, if you fracture a weapon first, right? And then you Contempt Essence for another 2 mods or another mod, and then you can do some harvest shenanigans with the suffixes. This is looking very promising and very exciting for people who just want to craft their own gear. Essences are your solution. Very, very exciting indeed. I'm very happy that they've busted essences in this way. So that's for energy shield and physical damage weapons that they've introduced those changes, and you can expect that a lot of the big crafts for those 2 slots will be using essences, which is really, really nice. Very, very good. Abyss Jules, this is basically just a nerf to summoners, nothing really to see there. And then the Cluster Jewel balance. Oh my goodness, this is not good. So another nerf to Toxic Rain and all dot-based builds, and also a massive nerf to Assassin. So Vast Power has gotten a massive haircut, essentially. So it's capped at 50% now. So, you know, you used to get like 120 or 150 or even more if you use voices. Now you're going to get 50. So you're basically going to have to switch it up. It's not going to break the build by any means, but, you know, Vast Power is definitely not going to be something you stack on every single cluster jewel anymore, and as a result, Explode chaining and Blight Vortex is getting a nerf. But, you know, it's still going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. So yeah, pretty interesting. Brands also taking a pretty big hit. So Brands, Dots, Minions, and Assassin got the hits on the cluster jewels, and pretty interesting. We already talked about Blight. We got some Veiled mod stuff there. I will say though that the overall nerfs to Veiled mods actually is not as bad as I thought. There's only a few Veiled crafted modifiers which got a hit, and that is pretty much the Elrion channeling cost, and then also the socketed skills. Everything else is pretty much intact. All right, let's talk about the Zana mods. So if you're a juicer, it's not going to be a good time. There's pretty much no impactful Zana mods outside of Essence and Harvest on the map device. There could be some things to be said for Heist, but you know, overall not too compelling at 6 Chaos. So yeah, pretty much it's going to be a fairly vanilla league in terms of mapping, and we're going to be leaning on Ultimatum to give us the juice and hopefully give us the interest. There will be plenty of really interesting builds to go after with the new Vinktar changes. I think that's really, really cool. But overall, yeah, I think the actual mapping meta, if you want to get items, you will be getting less items, just overall. So that's pretty much going to be my assessment on the patch notes. Sorry it was so long, guys. Let's do a quick sum up. Items overall, much rarer. Everything to do with crafting in terms of beasts and everything overall in the game, much, much rarer. Overall levels of juice, way lower. Overall power level of builds, way lower. But there's still going to be interesting things to try. So if you are a general player, you know, if you do some maps, you're actually going to get more value for your loot because you weren't abusing these massively crazy strategies. So overall, the experience for the general player will be higher. There'll be less loot overall, but you'll be getting more for it. So that's going to be pretty awesome indeed. So with all that said, guys, hope you guys have enjoyed my kind of insights. Sorry for the long video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.